Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. One of the more fascinating conversations that we're seeing play out across college football is that starting quarterback position at Texas A&M. Now, Sunday morning, we hopped on and kind of talked about what we saw from Marcel Reed. I made my preliminary argument that I think Marcel Reed should be the guy for Texas A&M moving forward in 2024. Now, that might have been a little bit emotional, right? Less than 24 hours after the football game, had the opportunity to not only dive into some of the numbers, but also watch the game back a couple of different times. And I'll say this, sitting here Thursday morning, like I still feel that way. I think Marcel Reed is the quarterback that gives Texas A&M the best chance to win football games. And there's a couple of different conversations you have to have, but I think a lot of the Texas A&M fans kind of nailed it in the comment section as well. Like, you can evaluate Marcel Reed and Conner Weigman one-to-one as quarterbacks, but I think the much more important conversation is what quarterback runs this Texas A&M offense, excuse me, at a higher level. And I think that answer is obviously Marcel Reed. Not only did Marcel Reed play very, very good, and we're going to get into what we saw, but I think much more importantly, like, you saw Coach Colin Klein as a play caller much more comfortable with Marcel Reed as your quarterback, because there's things that Marcel Reed can do and that he's willing to do that Conner Weigman, quite frankly, was just not willing to do throughout the first game and a half that we saw Conner Weigman play. So I want to get into what we saw from Marcel Reed, specific things that he did against Florida that I think really open up this Texas A&M offense. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Texas A&M fans, we hopped on Sunday morning and kind of broke it down. I think a lot of the Texas A&M fans and I were probably on the same page in terms of wanting to see Marcel Reed at least have the chance to kind of stack some positive performances. So I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Again, the Texas A&M fans, even going back to the offseason, y'all continue to show a ton of love to the boys. Appreciate y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with, kind of an important conversation that is Conner Weigman was named quarterback one heading into 2024. He gets banged up. Should he lose his starting job because of the injury? Where I would start with this, and I want to preface this with the Texas A&M fans who were rocking with the boys going way back to the summer. Like, y'all know that Conner Weigman was my dark horse candidate in the SEC. I thought this kid would be a household name at the end of 2024, and not much has changed. Like, I'm still very, very high on Conner Weigman as a quarterback, but I think the important conversation to have is, has Conner Weigman done enough to kind of be that quarterback one unquestionably? And I don't think he has. I mean, you've seen flashes from Conner Weigman. You go back to 2023 against Miami early in that 2023 season. That was, in my opinion, a brilliant performance from Conner Weigman. That being said, all the flashes that you've seen Conner Weigman have, they've happened with a different coaching staff, with a different offense. And so I don't think a lot of those flashes should be that important in terms of this new Texas A&M regime. And quite frankly, we've seen the flashes, but we haven't really seen the consistency. So my kind of overall take would be, look, Conner Weigman has shown some good things, but I don't think he's overall been consistent and good enough to be unquestionably quarterback one, especially when you have a guy coming off the bench in Marcel Reed who looked like he did against Florida. Let's be frank, like, the best version of this Texas A&M offense throughout the first 3 weeks, we just saw last Saturday in the swamp against Florida. And so I don't love the idea of, like, Conner Weigman losing his starting spot because of an injury. That being said, I don't know if it's just because of the injury, because we saw Marcel Reed come out and just play and run this Texas A&M offense at a much, much higher level. Now, I think the second conversation, and again, the most important conversation here, is what quarterback allows you to run the ideal Texas A&M offense, the Texas A&M offense that Coach Colin Klein wants to run. This is the strongest argument for Marcel Reed. It is very clear that Coach Colin Klein is much more comfortable calling his plays with a guy like Marcel Reed at quarterback. You look at Coach Colin Klein's track record in terms of the best offenses he's been able to produce. It's been with dual threat quarterbacks that can hurt you athletically, that can get outside the pocket, that can throw off platform. Think about a guy like Will Howard last year, but not even just Will Howard. There's a laundry list of quarterbacks that have been athletic quarterbacks that Coach Colin Klein has had success with. And quite frankly, Coach Colin Klein, as a football player himself, was an athletic quarterback that wanted to get it done with his legs Like, so I think the connection between Coach Colin Klein and Marcel Reed is even stronger. I think they see the game in a very similar way. Now, you look at Conner Weigman and say, yeah, Conner Weigman, and he's a solid athlete, but there's levels to it. And I think more importantly, Marcel Reed is just a better athlete at the quarterback position. But more importantly, like Marcel Reed showed the ability and willingness, more importantly, the willingness to be a dual threat quarterback, where Conner Weigman didn't really show much willingness to be an athlete in the pocket. He's much more of a quarterback that wants to operate from the pocket, go through his progressions, and deliver the football downfield. Marcel Reed showed the ability, but more importantly, the willingness to be a dynamic quarterback that wants to use his legs. I don't think it's a coincidence that this Texas A&M offensive line had its best performance against Florida with Marcel Reed at quarterback, because this offense, especially when they want to run the football, is so multidimensional. Like, you have Marcel Reed at quarterback, there are so many different schemes and abilities to run the football. And so you could tell this Texas A&M offensive line was just much more comfortable in the run blocking department, specifically with Marcel Reed at quarterback. He ran for 310 yards. You take a look at the recipe that we think Texas A&M is going to use to win football games. It's exactly what we saw against Florida. Like, you scroll down and say, all right, 310 rushing yards to 52, time of possession 37 minutes to 22 minutes. This is exactly why we were so high on Texas A&M heading into the season, right? It's an elite defense. I think this Texas A&M defense is about as good as it gets in the SEC, specifically on the defensive line, and I only think it gets better with Coach Mike Elko continuing to develop these guys. The recipe here for Texas A&M, we saw on Saturday: run the football consistently, control the time of possession, and play really good defense. I think Marcel Reed's the quarterback that gives you that kind of ability. Now you get into Marcel Reed's performance and say, look, he's a quarterback that the arm talent's there. When Marcel Reed was coming out of high school, he was a raw quarterback, but you knew he had a live arm. He wasn't as polished as a guy like Conner Weigman. That's why he wasn't ranked as high coming out of high school. But we all knew the talent was there, and we kind of saw that get put together Saturday against Florida. You get into some of the reps that we saw. I think this first one is this is the Colin Klein offense, right? We did a bunch of film breakdowns with Colin Klein at Kansas State and talking about what he was going to bring to Texas A&M. We hadn't really seen that throughout the first 2 weeks. You saw the Colin Klein offense on full display against Florida. Right here, we're going two tight end sets, which we thought we'd see more of, and you're seeing more of it with Marcel Reed at quarterback because of the different ways Texas A&M can run the football. Heavy play action. We're flooding that field or the boundary side here. We're getting Marcel Reed out of the pocket, but you take a look at setting his feet off platform and throwing just an absolute strike down the field. Though that's the exact concept, those vertical concepts that we saw Colin Klein have so much success with that at Kansas State. That's what we saw. You look at Colin Klein and how he wants to throw the football. It wants to be married off the rushing attack. If this Texas A&M team cannot run the football, that passing attack is not as effective with Coach Colin Klein. What quarterback gives you the better ability to run the football, therefore marry your passing game with that rushing attack? I think it's Marcel Reed. And you obviously see him have the ability to make those high-level throws as well. Obviously hitting Cyrus Allen, a 70-yard touchdown here. You go to the next play here, I think Marcel Reed is much more polished and in command of the offense than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Like, a lot of people want to talk about what Marcel Reed did with his legs and how dynamic he was in space. That is certainly an asset, the biggest asset that Marcel Reed brings. But when it comes to being a pure pocket passer, you look at this 3rd and 8 position, I think a lot of Texas A&M fans would assume Texas A&M's toast when they're sitting 3rd and 8 with Marcel Reed at quarterback. Ron Roberts wanted to really scheme up some blitzes on the redshirt freshman. He did so here. What does Marcel Reed do? Hey, I'm getting pressure here from the field side safety. I know how to replace my pressure, right? I'm going to go quick to my hot, get a really good ball in stride to my running back, and let him do the rest of the work. And so Marcel Reed handling all the different blitz packages that you saw Coach Roberts at Florida throw at him was really impressive as well. Last play I want to talk about is just going through your progressions, being a really good pocket passer. 2nd and 12 here. We're going to try to look to get Jade Walker up the seam here, or up the boundary, I should say here. Comes off that read, goes to the middle of the field, sets his feet, throws a strike over the middle of the field, right to the face mask of the tight end. And so there were aspects of Marcel Reed where, yeah, I think a lot of the highlights go to what we saw from Marcel Reed being an athlete. He brings a lot of juice as a pocket passer as well. And I think that's kind of a conversation that gets lost for a lot of fans talking about Marcel Reed. He was 11 to 17 for buck 78. What does this coach Colin Klein offense want to look like? We want to be run heavy. And we certainly saw that Saturday against Florida, right? We only threw 17 passes. That being said, when we do want to throw the football, we want to be explosive. Coach Colin Klein was top 10 in the country in terms of yards per pass attempt at Kansas State last year. You take a look at yards per completion for Texas A&M on Saturday, it was 16.5 yards. And so you saw effective rushing attack going for over 300 yards and then marrying that explosive passing attack with that rushing attack. Marcel Reed did that. And so at the end of the day, I think the question is not necessarily who's the better quarterback, because in a different scheme, you'd probably go with Conner Weigman. That being said, with the Coach Colin Klein offense and how Mike Elko and Texas A&M want this football team to look, I think it's pretty clear that Marcel Reed is the guy for this Texas A&M team. So I'm leaning Marcel Reed to be the starting quarterback for Texas A&M. But at the very least, I don't think Conner Weigman's done enough to kind of have that quarterback one spot reserved for him. And if Marcel Reed stacks another good performance against Bowling Green on Saturday, I think it becomes pretty clear that Marcel Reed's the guy for Texas A&M. And at the end of the day, you can't just go off the recruiting rankings, right? This is year 3 for Conner Weigman, hasn't quite put it together. You look at Marcel Reed, although was a 3-star coming out, only a redshirt freshman. I think it's become very clear that Marcel Reed's the quarterback that gives Texas A&M the best chance to operate how their offense wants to look with Coach Colin Klein. I can't wait. Hey, I didn't think I'd be watching the Bowling Green game, Texas A&M Bowling Green game. Dang sure well know that it's going to be on one of my screens on Saturday afternoon. Marcel Reed's very fun to watch. I think he gives Texas A&M the best chance to run the offense how they want to run it. We'll close it out there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.